Up right now on CBSSports.com is the college football CBS Sports 130. We've been doing a top 25 countdown on HQ. Today, coming in at number 14, the LSU Tigers. 2019 national champions took a big step back in 2020. And it wasn't because they lost a ton of guys in the NFL like Joe Burrow. Yes, that has to do with it. But here's Go Tigers head coach Ed Orgeron on the difficulties of trying to win consecutive titles.
I never thought last year was coming. That's it. To be honest with you. But you know what? It's over. It's past. It's 1 year at a time, one game at a time. Just like the 2019 season, I talked to coaches that won a championship and said you got to be careful of talking about last season too much. Well, I don't have to worry about me talking about last season too much anyway. But we have to learn from the lessons. And you play in the SEC, man, you got to come with your hands up every night.
That was Coach O at SEC Media Day. So the Tigers did have some injuries in 2020, most notably Myles Brennan played in just 3 games last season. He's hurt again this year, but Max Johnson, a big reason to be optimistic in 2021. He helped the Tigers salvage a non-losing season by leading the way to help to a 5-5 finish, including wins at Florida and then home against Ole Miss. Let's welcome in Barrett Sallee to focus on the LSU Tigers here in this top 25 countdown. Again, the Tigers come in at number 14 of the CBS Sports 130. Let's start with Coach O, Barrett. You were at SEC Media Days. Takeaways of him, of course, he was able to be sort of vindicated with that national championship, but they took a step back on that 5-5 record in 2020.
Yeah, to me, Coach O was very humble. And I saw LSU 7 times in person in 2019. And I think in 2020, he had a misguided view of how to handle that success. He was too loyal to people he knew, and that's why he hired Bo Pelini as his defensive coordinator. He assumed that Steve Ensminger would just magically, by osmosis, sort of replicate the offense that Joe Brady had in 2019, and that didn't happen. And he recognized that, and you heard in that clip that he didn't handle it the right way. And look, it's hard for coaches to figure out how to sustain success. Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney have done it. Ed Orgeron really had never been in that position where he had to figure it out. And he's right. He focused too much on 2019 during the 2020 season, and I think maybe he lost sight of the fact that he had so many new players on that roster that weren't necessarily key contributors the year before in the national championship season. So my takeaway from Coach O is that he gets it. He understands exactly what went wrong, and he took a lot of steps to try to fix that this year, including hiring Jake Peetz, a new offensive coordinator who's going to replicate a lot of what Joe Brady did 2 years ago, and Durante Jones, a guy who's young and can connect to these players and runs a defense a lot like Dave Aranda did.
We'll get to Jones in just a second, but Barrett, one thing that will not change is the way he has his quarterback play. About Johnson, he said, quote, I want to make sure I say it right here, I think you have to do the things you have to do to win, just like we did with Joe, so we can be running around, and if he gets hit, he gets hit. We were anticipating a true quarterback battle here with Johnson and Brennan, so Brennan continues to be hurt. It's not going to be that way. How did you envision this battle going out anyways? Did you have Brennan winning? Did you have Johnson out here? And how do you think the Tigers will respond?
Yeah, I had Myles Brennan winning the battle, but I was also of the belief before all of this happened with Myles Brennan that LSU had the healthiest quarterback competition, maybe just in the country, certainly in the SEC, because they have 2 guys, Myles Brennan and Max Johnson, who have succeeded on this stage before. I mean, look, Max Johnson had a ton of pressure on him when he came in late last season. If you remember the Florida game, which they won, sort of gets branded as the shoe game, but LSU was down like 20 scholarship players in that game, and Max Johnson still found a way to get the job done. 6 touchdowns over the final 2 regular season games, and there was pressure on LSU last year. They didn't want to finish with a losing season, and Max Johnson got the job done. So I picked Myles Brennan. I'm fine with Max Johnson, but I think what you mentioned is really important, that Joe Burrow moved around a little bit in the pocket. Max Johnson can do that. He's more than a willing runner. And if you go back to 2019, we all focused on the successes that Joe Burrow had through the air. But I remember that season, there were 7 to 10 times per game where they counted on Joe Burrow to make something happen with his legs. I think Max Johnson can do that as well. So that's why I think in terms of fit, he fits to what Jake Peetz wants to do. Ed Orgeron told me at Media Days, a lot of 5-man protections, almost exclusively 5-man protections. It's exactly what they did in 2019, and that means Max Johnson will have to rely on his legs, not just as a runner, but as a runner who actually gets counted on to make plays in critical situations with his legs.
It's the quarterback battle at fall camp that we do not get due to injury, but again, some quality there on the roster. Let's go now and reference the defense. They gave up almost 35 points per game, 98th in the country. That's about 2 touchdowns more than they did in 2019, Barrett. So again, Daronte James Jones comes in. Where were they extremely poor last season, and where can he help here?
2 words, Bo Pelini. That's why they were extremely poor last year. Watching that defense play last year was just so frustrating because for all the talent that they had, now granted, a lot of the players that they had were young guys that were thrown into the fire, but they were confused, man. They had no idea where to be, why they needed to be there, or what Bo Pelini was asking them to do. So addition by subtraction, Bo Pelini not being there is a massive win for the Tigers. And then you look at what their defense will look like this year. 9 starters back, pretty much the entire front 7. The only starter who is not the new starter is Mike Jones, who was an impact player at Clemson previously in his career. So you have that experience, and a lot of times, Tommy, negative experience helps create success in the future, and I think that's what happens with LSU and what will happen with LSU. Daronte Jones, defensive back by trait, so he's going to come in there and he's going to count on Derek Stingley to be that leader. But you look at that secondary, they've got 3 starters back, and so I think those guys are going to connect with Jones. We've seen that already. And when you have a front 7 that is as experienced as they are, and guys like Ali Gay and Glenn Logan up front, then I think that defense will be significantly better. And look, let's be honest, if the offense is what I think it'll be, they just have to be adequate defensively like they were in 2019, and I think that's exactly what will happen.
And Jones is an NFL guy, which we know, of course, the college guys at LSU all look forward to head to the next level. And, of course, the track record for the Tigers has been fantastic. All right, let's end with the betting aspect of this. So the Caesars Sportsbook win total is 8.5. And I know you're big on the LSU Tigers, so I'm not going to ask you if it's over because I know it's over. But, Barrett, what do you think? 10, 11 wins, or even more for this team?
Yeah, I've got LSU at 11-1 and winning the SEC West. I think their only loss will be to a very, very dangerous Ole Miss team. They'll catch them at the wrong time. And look, it would be an upset, but upsets happen all the time. I think they go to Tuscaloosa and win. But I think the interesting thing about this schedule, you look at the home and away splits. At Mississippi State, home against Auburn. At Kentucky, home against Florida. You do have the back-to-back road games against Ole Miss and Alabama, but there's a bye week in between those two. So I think in terms of LSU's schedule, 8.5 regular season wins is incredibly low. I would hammer that over. I think they're 11-1. And a lot of times when you're betting over and under in win totals, Tommy, you have to look at the out-of-conference game. I know at UCLA, different kind of road trip traveling across the country. I don't think UCLA is going to be worth anything this year. So you chalk that up, the out-of-conference game, as a win. And in situations like this, when you look at a relatively low win total, out-of-conference games matter, and I think LSU got hooked up with a pretty easy one this year.
All right, and the over at plus money. So Barrett says hammer that. And by the way, check his stuff out on Sportsline this season. Anticipating another great year from Barrett in the ATS department. All right, let's take a look at the CBS Sports Top 25 Countdown schedule. Again, the Sports 130 is online right now, but for our purposes, we're doing Wisconsin tomorrow, Florida then on Thursday, and to end the work week, Cincinnati representing the group of 5 on the list.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.